So most of us have experienced the annoyance of laying in bed, anticipating a good night's sleep, but then all of a sudden it's like someone flicks a switch in our brains and we start thinking about this and that, the thing we said, the thing we shouldn't have said, the thing we did, the thing we shouldn't have done, right? And everything in between. Now, while it's normal for our brains to run through the events of the day and try to make sense of our world, these thoughts become an issue when they prevent us from falling asleep. So the next time you experience anxiety at nighttime, consider trying one or all 10 of these techniques that I walk you through in this video. Hi, I'm Katie Azevedo from SchoolHabits.com, and I'm a private executive function coach who teaches students and professionals strategies to learn and work better. If this video provides value to you, please give it a like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. That stuff makes a world of difference to me. And if you're looking for a lot more behind the scenes tips and tricks for productivity in school and study and work and all things like that, then follow me over on Instagram. All right, let's get started. Now, the following 10 strategies are geared towards students, but you'll see as we make our way through the video that the majority of them will most certainly apply to everyone. Now, of course, I am not a medical doctor, and these strategies are not a substitute for medical advice. So if you need to seek the help of a professional, please do so. Now, here we go, 10 strategies for managing anxiety at nighttime. Number 1, block out anxiety triggers 60 to 90 minutes before bed. And this takes you a step beyond the don't watch TV because of the blue light strategy that we all know, right? But this involves identifying your own personal anxiety triggers. Now, anxiety triggers are different for everybody. It could be watching a scary movie, that's me. It could be email, texting, social media. It could be video games. It could be even reading a scary book. For me personally, it's watching scary movies and it's watching the news. And honestly, if you think about it, like, what's the difference between the two? So those are 2 anxiety triggers that I avoid before bed. So it is absolutely worth your effort to take the time to think about what activities are you doing before bed? How are they genuinely making you feel? Get real about this. This isn't woo-woo stuff. This is like real stuff. Strategy number 2, do a brain dump. Now, I talk about this one all the time, and I do it all the time, and it works. So if you're laying in bed, anticipating a good night's sleep, and suddenly your brain is like on turbo fire, consider doing a brain dump. Now, one of my most popular posts on SchoolHabits.com is how to do a brain dump. I'm going to leave a link to that tutorial in the description box below. And in that tutorial, I walk you through exactly step-by-step instructions for how to do a brain dump. For the sake of keeping this video on the shorter side, I'm going to give the 3 general strategies for a brain dump, and if you need more than what I give here, then check out the full tutorial below. So step number 1 is, without censoring or filtering yourself, you write down absolutely every single thing that's on your mind on a piece of paper in a list format. Don't worry about grammar, don't worry about spelling, no complete sentences. Just absolutely write down everything that's bubbling up in your mind until there's nothing left in your head. Now, some examples of these things. Now, remember, there's no rules really for a brain dump as far as like whatever you have in your head is whatever you have in your head, like no judgment here, okay? But if you're like, well, I don't even know what I have in my head, then here's some guidance to get you started. So things you have to do, things you think you should do, things that are bothering you, people you're thinking about, questions you have, things you're wondering, ideas that you have, random thoughts, upcoming appointments, things that you want to do that you wish you didn't do, things that you said, things that you want to tell somebody, absolutely anything at all that's in your head gets put on paper. Step 2, review and sort. And this is where I put my own twist on the classic brain dump. Now, I did not invent the brain dump. That's a thing, okay? But this is where I put my classic twist on it, which is the review and sort process. So I suggest that you take absolutely every single thing that you dumped onto the piece of paper and categorize it into 3 different things. Number 1 is an action. That's something that you could do. Number 2 is ideas for later. So these are non-urgent and things that you might, maybe not judging that yet, right? Things that you might get to later. And 3 is worries and non-changeables. So anything that's bothering you, that's on your mind, but you can't actually do something about. And number 3 is to deal with all of these things. Now, in the tutorial that I'm linking below, I give a 3-step process for how exactly to deal with the actions, the ideas, and the worries. Now, this brain dump shouldn't take you an hour. It can take, depending on how much you have on your mind, anywhere between 5 minutes and 20 minutes. But honestly, like, let's say it even takes 20 minutes. But it gives you a full night's sleep. Isn't it worth it? And if you're saying like, well, I don't have 20 minutes before bed and like, it's gonna take me too long and I'll just sit here and fall asleep. Oh my gosh, you have got to try a brain dump because it's magic. At the end of it, you're like, I have nothing left in my head. Then you can go to sleep because you've been released of thinking of all these things. Now, personally, I keep a notebook next to my bed, and this is kind of going into step number 3, but I have a dedicated notebook next to my bed that's just for brain dumps. You could do it on a piece of paper. You don't have to be as notebooky as I am, but I do suggest doing this process on paper. So number 3, keep a pad of paper next to your bed. If you wake up in the middle of the night with a thought, an idea, a worry, something that you remembered, absolutely anything that didn't make its way into your brain dump, you write it down. The very process of writing it down and using this piece of paper as kind of like an external hard drive for your brain gives our brains permission to let them go. Because otherwise, our working memory is going to do the best it possibly can to keep that information at the front of our mind so that we don't forget it. Because our brains don't know if that, like, some memory that we had in the middle of the night is essential for our survival. The mechanisms for keeping that awake and alive in our memories is the same, whether it's like we just remembered someone's birthday or we remembered that there was a lion in the cave that we shouldn't return to that cave, right? It's going to produce the same level of anxiety because, like, we haven't evolved that much if you think about it. Even if you wake up in the middle of the night and have to turn on your light for a second and just write it down, that gives your brain permission to let it go because it trusts that piece of paper to store that information until the morning. Number 4, organize your morning the night before. So many anxious thoughts stem from a feeling of not feeling in control. So one way to regain a sense of control is to take a few moments at night to set yourself up for at least the first part of your day in the morning. This could look like prepping and planning breakfast. It could look like picking out your outfit for the day. It could look like packing your work bag or your backpack, planning your first hour for the day, setting up for any classes you have in the morning. Now, I have a variety of super simple daily agenda printables. I'll again leave that in the description box below, but super simple printables that are exactly for this purpose. Number 5, listen to a guided sleep meditation. You can do free versions on YouTube or you can get yourself an app. There's free apps and there's paid apps. One person who I really recommend, Tara Brach. It's B-R-A-C-H. She's incredible. You can find her on YouTube. She's also has a lot of meditations on paid apps, but you can do the free stuff. There's also something called sleep stories. Consider researching that too. So what happens is when we're laying in bed and we're feeling anxious, our internal dialogue is often stronger than we can manage. And so we do need an external voice, like literally someone else's voice, to sort of overpower our own internal dialogue. Following along with someone else's guided meditation is sometimes all we need. Number 6, if you're anxious specifically about a test, then accept it. Now, I'm going to explain this in a minute. Now, of course, I said test, so if you're a student, this applies to you, but I want you to think if you're a working professional and you have a presentation in the morning or a project that's due, this strategy applies to you as well. Just replace the word test with project or presentation, okay? Now, we are usually anxious about tests or presentations or whatever because we don't feel prepared for it. Now, I'm not saying we're anxious because we aren't prepared for it. Sometimes that's the case too, but usually it's the feeling of not feeling prepared that gives us the anxiety. And of course, if you genuinely aren't prepared for a test, then yeah, you're not going to feel good the night before. So if this is the cause of your anxiety, then you essentially have 2 options. Number 1, prepare more. But you know, this isn't always possible if it's actually the night before the test. Do not pull an all-nighter. That's not going to help your performance. It's also not going to help your anxiety, okay? So if your nighttime anxiety strikes a couple nights before the actual test or project or presentation, okay, then this is your wake-up call that you're probably not prepared, and to maybe revamp how you've been studying, how you've been preparing, take control of that and do better. Or number 2, accept that you aren't prepared and then accept the consequences. Now, probably about 0 people love that piece of advice that I just gave, but honestly, if it's the night before the test and you're realizing, oh my God, I really did not prepare for this test, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do about it? Like, the anxiety is not gonna help, and neither is pulling an all-nighter. So the best you can get from this scenario is to be like, well, that super stinks, but I'm not gonna do this to myself again. The next time I have a test, like, let's say you accidentally didn't prepare well enough because maybe you misjudged how long it was gonna take you to get through the material, maybe you thought the test was on a different day, whatever the reasons, or maybe you were just like, weren't feeling the study piece, but now you're like, oh my gosh, this doesn't feel good, then you gotta have to make a change about how you prepare for tests or presentations or projects going forward, because this should be your wake-up call that this anxiety at nighttime feeling doesn't feel good. Number 7, read something non-triggering. Now, we all know that reading is a great way to take our mind off something that's bothering us, but there's a real reason for this. So when we're reading, of course, we're using the language centers in our brain. And then when we're ruminating, which is thinking these anxious thoughts over and over again, we're also using language centers. And our brains are amazing machines. Oh my gosh, they are, but like they're not that awesome that they can have two separate conversations going on at the same time. So if you read something pretty neutral, like if you're triggered, right? Like step number one, know what your triggers are. If you're triggered by scary books, don't pick up a scary book, but pick something neutral or non-triggering for you and read for 20 to 30 minutes before bed. It is incompatible, like processing a book is incompatible with having that internal anxiety producing dialogue with yourself. Number 8, I love this one, not just as an anxiety before a nighttime strategy, but as like a lifetime strategy. Make a list of things that make you happy. Now I say at least 10 items, but honestly, like if you're having a lot of anxiety, try to make this list as exhaustive as possible, like until you can't think of anything else. So it's simple strategy. Grab a piece of paper, like from a tree. Don't do this digitally, definitely not this one. And just go ham with writing everything that makes you happy. Don't judge. If it's some like weird thing that makes you happy, write it down. Just spending 3 minutes on this activity can absolutely disrupt the negative thinking patterns that suck us in before bed. And this also helps release endorphins, which of course are essential to priming us for sleep. Number 9, reframe your anxious thoughts as physical symptoms. Now bear with me on this one. Do not fast forward through this strategy if you think it's too weird, or if you think it's too sciencey, or maybe even not sciencey enough. Trust me, it works. And if my explanation here isn't sufficient for you to understand how to do this, then by all means just Google how to do it and you might get a much better description. My goal with this video is to give you like 10 essential strategies that are pretty general, and if you want to dive deeper into any one of them, by all means, go do that. So instead of thinking, oh no, I have so much to do tomorrow, we would instead reframe how that is showing up in our bodies. Okay? Is it giving us a headache? Is it giving us a stomach ache? Is it making us sweat, making our heart beat fast? Anxiety shows up differently physically for all of us. We'd replace thoughts of, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed with, gee, my shoulders are really high right now. Okay? We want to separate the thought and the narrative and the story from the physical symptom. And in doing so, the story loses its grip on us. By focusing instead on the physical symptom and detaching it from the reason why we have anxiety and all of this, okay, even if those reasons are legit, even if they're so super valid, by not giving them the energy of thinking about, this is the reason why I'm feeling this, just saying, I feel it in my body right now, as a stomach ache, as a rapid heartbeat. It helps that anxiety lose its power over us. Number 10, do a body scan and a muscle release. So starting from the tip of your toes all the way to your head, you want to sequentially clench and hold all your muscles, one at a time. Now there's a lot of tutorials for this on YouTube and things like that, but most of the guided meditations that I've gone through have us hold our muscles for 5 to 7 seconds. So not only does it work scientifically by changing our blood chemistry, because the very process of like clenching and holding these muscles does require certain hormones from us, certain chemicals from us, so it changes our blood chemistry, which is sometimes just enough to disrupt that anxiety. And the second piece is this requires a lot of concentration and focus, because you're thinking, okay, what muscle's next? Is it my calf? Is it my kneecap? Wait, what? Kneecaps aren't muscles. See? Anatomy. Whatever. Is it my quad? Is it my hamstring? On top of that, you're counting for 5 to 7 seconds, and there's also like a breathing component as well. And if you're doing that, then you can't be focusing on like all the things you should have said and the things you should have done and all the right? It's kind of like that reading strategy where your brain can't do these two things at one time. So listen, anxiety at any time of day, at any time in your life is no fun, but anxiety at night is super problematic because it disrupts your sleep. And if you have disrupted sleeping patterns, then it can trigger your anxiety or exacerbate anxiety. And then we're left in this terrible cycle. So the next time you're feeling that hit of anxiety right before you go to bed, try one or all 10 of these strategies, okay? It might just be all that you need. And of course, don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and I truly, genuinely hope they help, and thank you so much for watching.